Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Daf Yud Tes, Bava Kamma 19. We're going to start on Yud Tes Amud Aleph 4-1 on the top by Rav Ashi. Rashi asked the following question: Yesh Shinoi L'Tzoros L'Revia Nezek, Alein Shinoi L'Tzoros L'Revia Nezek. We've been discussing the concept of tzoros, which is pebbles, that if an ox kicks off stones while it's walking in the normal manner, and then the stones jump and cause damage, according to the Rabbanan, you pay half damages. According to Simplus, you pay full damages. But now the Gemara says Rav Ashi is asking a question. According to the Rabbanan, who say it's tzoros, it's half damages. What if the tzoros were done in an unusual manner? For example, let's say the animal kicked. That's unusual, and that caused the stones to come off. So now do we say that that's quarter damages? It's the regular one is half, so it's an unusual one, so therefore it's a quarter. It's half of that, which is a quarter. Or maybe no, it's just we're going to say that there's no difference, and so therefore we're going to say that we don't accept that. So the Gemara, so also in these circumstances, we're going to say it's half damages. So the Gemara says, well, Tivshalei midarava. Why don't we answer this based on what Rava said? Debai Rava. Rava said, Yesha ado etzoros or ena ado etzoros. Rava said, can a tzoros ever become a muad? Can, if it does the same action 3 times, is the expectation that it's going to do it? And so therefore, under those circumstances, we're going to say it pays full damages. So Mikal, from the fact that it could go from half to whole, we call the Shinoi. That proves that the regular half is the unusual one, and so therefore there's nothing less than that. The Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the case. Dilma Rava im timsi lomer kama. Maybe Rava's question was an im timsi lomer question. Im timsi lomer ain't Shinoi, if you want to say that there's no Shinoi, there's no Mashuna, it's never quarter damages by tzoros, means it's minimum it's half. The next question is Yesha Ado Ein Ado. Can it go to full damages if it does it 3 times? So in that question is left unresolved. Teku. Next question by Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi asked another question. We already had this question on yesterday's daf, but was just alluded to. And now he says, Yes, by Rav Ashi, let's say the pebbles went and hit something, a different stone, and that other stone went and broke something. So that's the koach of his kocho. That's the force from his force. So it's a second degree removed. So according to Sumkos, do we say that's kikochodami? That's like regular tzoros? Oh, well, or do we say it's not like regular tzoros? Meaning to say, do we say that there we would pay half damages? So the question is, migamer halacha mukila b'koch. The Sumkos actually learn the same halacha Moshe Messina, the law from Moses Sinai that the Rabbanan do, and the Rabbanan say that it means tzoros is half damages, but the Sumcha say, I have that tradition, but I only do it by a koach kocho, by a second degree removed. Oh, well, or maybe he doesn't say that. Maybe he doesn't learn this at all, and he always says it's full damages. So teku, again, it's an unresolved question. Next case is Haisamid Ba'etes. Let's say the animal was kicking. It said in our Mishnah, if the animal kicked, or the pebbles jumped out from underneath its feet, and it broke the utensil, so if it kicked, or if the pebbles jumped out and broke something, he pays half damages. But the Gemara says, we don't understand the question of the Mishnah. What's exactly the question? What's the question? What's our Mishnah saying? If while he's kicking, he does damage with its foot, which is clearly mishuna, it's unusual, it's goring. Tzoros, or if he does the pebbles, torchayu, in the normal manner of its walking, misham chatzi nezek, pays half damages, and that's the position of the Rabbanan, who say tzoros is half damages. Or do we say, odama haisam mivaetes, or do we say that perhaps if he kicked, v'zika b'biuta, and as a result of its kicking, it did damages. Tzoros machmas biut. Or if it did the pebbles as a result of its kicking, mishayim chatzi nezek. That means to say it was unusual, the tzoros, and so therefore it pays half damages. And haki orchem mishalim nezik sham, but if we have done it in the normal manner and pay full damages, and umane, and whose position is this? Is the position of sumchas. So is our Mishnah maybe like sumchas? Or it says, let's learn out from the concluding clause of the Mishnah, Tashma Miseifa, where it states, Dar Sala Kliva Shivarto, if the animal steps on the utensil while it's walking and breaks it, and the utensil breaks and falls on another piece, Vishivra, and it breaks the second piece, I'll reach him Shaim Nezik Shaim. For the first one, he pays full damages, Va'achon Chatzi Nezek. For the second one, he pays half damages. So we say, Ve'i Sumchas. And if you want to say that the second one is the position of sumchus, misle chatzi nezek, sumchus wouldn't be saying that in this case you pay half damages because it's a case of troros. So therefore, we're saying that clearly it's the position of the Rabbanan. So our Mishnah must be following the Rabbanan, and therefore the first case is just the case of troros. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, and if you want to say Rishon la'ataza, Visheni la'ataza, if you want to say, well, no, the first one is Tzoros, and the second one is like Koach Kocho, it's the force of the force. Vishani Simchos ben Koach Kocho, and Simchos himself draws a distinction between if it's direct or if it's a second degree. It can't be because Rav Ashi, who asked the question, how by Rav Ashi, Koach Kocho, Simchos Kocho Dami, Olav Kocho Dami. He could have proved from here that it's not Kekochodami. And so therefore, in this case, he pays half damages, and that would be his answer to what Simcha says in this case. So therefore, the Gemara says, no, Rav Ashi Karabana Mukila. Rav Ashi holds like the Rabbanan. And Rav Ashi is basically says the whole Mishnah follows the position of the Chachamim. And this is his question, according to Rav Ashi's reading. If the animal kicks and does damage, or if it does tzoros in the typical manner, it pays chatzi nezek. But if it, as a result of its kicking, it does its tzoros, that's ravia nezek. V'yesh shinoi. And as a result of this, there is mishuna, there is something unusual for tzoros, which they pay quarter damages. Or his other possible question is, Odelma ha'ismebaetes ve'zika v'biuta, or let's say it was kicking and does damage. O tzoros machmas biut chatzi nezek ve'ein shinoi. Or it does half damage is if it kicks the pebbles up, if it kicks and as a result the pebbles fly up, it pays half damages ve'ein shinoi. And so that's the question Rav Ashi asked. So therefore, Rav Ashi leaves this question, and the Gemara leaves it unresolved. We leave this question unresolved. So says the Gemara, "By mine Rabbi Abba, bar Memel mi Rabbi Ami Vamel mi Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. Ha'isam halachas b'makom she'yafshar lo." Let's say the animal is walking in a place where it's really unable to walk. Elam came in atezes. The animal is walking in a place where it can't walk without kicking up stones. So it's really regel. Uvata, but the animal kicks, so it does an unusual manner. Vitiza, and kicks up the stones. Vizika. So it would have anyway kicked, brought up the stones, but it did it in an unusual manner. Do we say Mao Kivan or do we say it's the normal manner, it's regular, and it pays half damages? Or maybe since it happens as a result of the kicking, we're going to view it as tzoros in an unusual manner and pay quarter damages. So the Gemara says we leave this question unresolved. Take it. So now we have Rabbi Yirmiyah asking Rabbi Zera some questions. Let's say the animal is walking in the public domain. Vitiza vizika. And so therefore it does the walking and it kicks up the pebbles and it does damage. So what will we say about tzoros in the public domain? Do we say do we compare it to goring mechayeves, and so therefore you're going to be responsible even in the public domain for half damages? Odilma told the regel, or do we say no, it's a derivative of regel and it's walking, just walking in the normal manner, and so therefore in the public domain it's exempt. Patura Amalei Mistaba told the regel. So there says no. Let's say it's logical to assume it's like regel. Why? That's the logical assumption. So he just says mistabra. It says it's logical to assume that. But then the Gemara asks that Rabbi Yirmiyah says he teases the bereshus around. Once he does the damage in the public domain, meaning he kicks at the pebbles in the public domain, but the pebbles do their actual damage in the private domain. What will we say there? So Rabbi Zera responds, Akira in kana yishkan. Well, since you didn't pick it up in a place where it was prohibited, because the animal kicked it up in the public domain, so therefore, then we're not going to say that there's a hanacha. Then we're not going to hold them responsible if it ended up in the private domain. So that's what Rabbi Zera's position is. So Rabbi Yirmiyah challenges him, that the Brisa says if he's walking along the road and he kicks it up, whether in the private domain or the public domain, he's going to be responsible. Now, what's the scenario of this Brisa? Don't you want to say that he does the damage in the public? He picks it up in the public domain and he does the damage in the public domain. Gemara says no, and therefore there'll be a question on you, Rabbi Zera, because you said in the public domain you're exempt. So Gemara says no, it has to say Tiza b'Rishus Harabim. No, it must be kicks it up in the public domain and the damage is done in the private domain. He says Rabbi Yirmiyah, but then you say Akira in Kana that he's not liable in that case since he picked it up in public. Rabbi Zera says, you know what? I changed my mind from that. Another attempt. Again, Rabbi Zera said two positions. Well, you're not liable for tzoros in the public domain, and two, if the tzoros happens in the public domain and the damage happens in the private domain, he says you're not. He had said you're not liable. So the Gemara says, Esrei Darsa al Akli v'Shivarto. Hold on 1 second. So the Gemara says, Esrei again, Rabbi Yirmiyah challenges Rabbi Zera. Darsa al Akli, let's say the animal tramples on your utensil, v'Shivarto, and it breaks it. V'Nafal Shavar al Kli Acher. For the first one you pay full, and the second one you pay half damages. The Tanya we learned about that, that's in the domain of the Nizak of Bershus Harabim, but in public, Rishon Petura. First one you're going to be exempt because it's regal. The second one you're liable for, and presumably you're liable, but tzoros. And so this is the question on Rabbi Zera, say you're not liable for tzoros in the public domain. And as the Gemara flashes out, my life, aren't we talking about a case where he teased Bershus Harabim, Zika Bershus Harabim? Are we talking about a case where the stones were picked up in the public domain and the damage occurred in the public domain, and we still say you're liable? And the Gemara says no. He teased Bershus. Rabbi Zera would say he teased Bershus Harabim, Zika Bershus Hayachad. The actual damage happened in the private domain, even though it started in the public domain. Gemara says, Rabbi Yirmiyah responds, but you said in that case he's not liable. Rabbi Zera says, I reversed myself about that. I reversed myself about saying if the damage happens in public and if the damage starts in public and occurs in private, I had said you're not liable, but now I said you're liable. But I still say that if the damage happens in public, you're exempt. Mar says, Rabbi, is this really the case? Is it really the case that a person is not going to be liable for tzoros damage in the public domain? We're on the top of Yud Tes on the base. And the Rabbi Yochanan had said there's no responsibility to pay half damages, meaning to say there's no distinction between the private domain and the public domain. And so we see from here, if there's that wherever you're liable in the private, you're liable in public. So if that's the case, you should be liable for tzoros in the public domain. Aren't we saying that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that even if the damage for tzoros occurred in the public domain, you're going to be liable? Mar says no. He's talking about a case where he's talking about a case where it started in public, but the actual damage occurred in private. Mar says, but didn't you just say that he's not responsible? So Rabbi Zera says, I changed my mind. Or alternatively, Rabbi Yochanan was saying about goring. Whoever you're responsible for half damages, you're responsible whether it's in public or in the other person's private domain. But not with respect to Rega or Tzoros. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Rabbi Shaya Akila Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya and Rabbi Shaya were sitting on the porch of Rabbi Yehuda, Nafak Melsa Mi Benayo, and they were discussing Torah. So kishkasha bezanva mahu. So one of them asked, let's say the animal did damage with its tail while it's walking. So generally speaking, you're exempt from walking in the public domain. Animal is going to be exempt, but now in this case, he did damage with its tail. So do we view that as goring? So he said. So the other one in response, what is he supposed to do? Hold its tail the whole time? So the Gemara says, what? Why are you ever responsible for goring of the animal? Are you supposed to hold the horn of the animal when you walk? The Gemara said that he responds, cases are totally different. Karen lav orche. It doesn't. The animal doesn't typically gore. Ha orche. The animal typically does move its tail. The orche, since if it typically moves its tail, what's the question? Mara says the question is kishkush yisera mibayla. The question is, let's say it moved its tail vigorously. It's unusual moving of the tail. Is he going to be responsible in public for that? And we say, and the answer is he's not. Okay, let's say the animal is an amma. The amma is the male organ. So, and it moved its amma in public and damaged. So do we say mi amrina midi de Karen? Do we say it's like goring? And so therefore you're responsible for half damages, but Karen lav yitzchak when it comes to goring, why do we hold the animal responsible? Because his inclination overcame him. Perhaps by the amma too, we'll say his inclination overcame him, and so therefore we're going to say, as a result of that, since his inclination overcame him, he's going to be responsible. Dilma Karen kavanaso ahazik, ayin kavanaso ahazik. What we say by goring, the intent of the animal is to do damage, and here the animal has no intent to do damage. So here you see we're giving intent to animal. We're talking about the animal's inclination. They had a lot of concepts of the animal having intent and inclination. Says the Mishnah said that a chicken is muad to walk in a normal manner and to break. And if it was hopping and had a utensil attached to it, he pays half damages. So it says the Gemara, Amar Afuna, when do we say that if there's a utensil attached to it, the animal pays half damages for what it did? That's where the animal it got attached to it on its own, meaning to say the bucket got attached, or the utensil became attached to the foot of the chicken. Of a kosher adam, but if a person tied it on, then he would say chayev. Then he would have to pay the full damages because it's like a pit in the public domain. So the Gemara says, "Well, nikshar me'elav man chayev." So if the bucket just, or if the utensil just happened to attach itself to the chicken, who's responsible? If you want to say the owner of the utensil is responsible, hey chidami, what's the case? If he had hid this bucket, honestly, it's not his fault. He shouldn't be responsible for anything. And if he didn't hide it, posheahu, he's negligent. He should pay full damages. So we're going to say no. We must say that the owner of the chicken, who's the one who created the problem, and he has to pay half damages. And so the Gemara says, why does he not pay full damages? Because it says, which means when a man opens a pit, but it's not when a ishbor shorpor, but if the ox opens a pit, you're not responsible. He shouldn't be responsible under these circumstances, because even half damages he shouldn't be responsible, because the damage was done by the chicken that opened the pit. So we have to say that our Mishnah, what are we referring to? Our Mishnah talking about a case where the chicken threw the bucket and it broke utensils. So it's like tsoros. So therefore, that's why he's responsible. And where Rav Huna said this law, that this only applies where the chicken got the bucket on its own, but if another person tied it, he's responsible. That was not said on our Mishnah. That was a general statement where he taught The Leo Hefker, he taught that, let's say you have a bucket that was onerous, and Amar Afuna Nikshar Me'elav Potter. But so there, Afuna says that if it became tied on its own to the if it became tied on its own, it's going. Then we're going to say that the owner of the chicken is going to be exempt because the chicken is the one that dug the pit, and you can't be responsible. But Kishar Adam, if a man tied a chayev, we're going to say he's responsible, and he has to pay full damages. Mishum Chayev Amar Afuna Bar Manoach Mishum Boro Amiskalgal Baragli Adam Baragli Abema, because it's what's called a Bor Amiskalgal, a rolling pit, and we're going to say that the rolling pit is going to be liable for the legs of a person and the legs of a man. Okay, so that's the first Mishnah, but we have a whole sugya. This is really one long sugya for the next 40 dapim. So we go on. Kate said Hashem says the next Mishnah. How is a tooth muedes? Lacho esarayla. A tooth is muedes to eat that which is royla. The tooth, basically, you're an animal. You're going to have to pay full damages if your animal goes into somebody else's property and eats that which it typically would eat. So a shein is muedes lacho es haroyla. The animal is muedes to eat fruits and vegetables. Let's say ksus, okay. And let's say the animal ate clothing, or misham chatzi nezik. If the animal ate these things that it doesn't typically eat, therefore it's going to be a tolada of goring, and so therefore it's not considered eating, and so it pays half damages. When do we say if the animal ate something that it typically eats, it pays full damages? That's in the domain of the nizak, but in the private domain. But if it was in public, he'd be exempt. And even though he is exempt from paying the damages if he ate it in the public domain, we're going to say that he pays, the animal has to pay, the owner of the animal has to pay according to what the animal benefits by eating. Now he doesn't have to give him lunch, so he has to pay for that. How does he benefit from what he eats? Let's say he ate from a place where there was the marketplace. He pays what he eats. Let's say he ate it from the side of the road. Then it's unusual and it's a derivative of goring, and so therefore he has to pay half damages. Also, if he ate it at the entrance of a store, then he has to pay what he ate because it's tooth in the public domain. But if he walked into the store, then he did goring and he has to pay according to the damage that he did, which would be full damages in this case because it's typical for him to eat in that manner. So the Gemara discusses the animal is a mu'ah to eat that which it typically eats. What does it typically eat? Kate said, let's say there's an animal that enters into the courtyard of the nizak and eats foods it typically eats, and it drinks things it typically drinks. It pays full damages. Also, a wild animal that enters into the nizak's courtyard, and grabs an animal and eats the flesh. It pays full damages. And if a cow ate barley, if a cow ate its cow food, the cow and a dog licked up the oil. A pig ate meat. They pay full damages because that's shame. So since these animals would eat these foods under duress, even though it's not their main diet, nevertheless, we're going to say it's considered tooth. Amar Papa Hasha de Amras called Midi to have Urchai. Now that you've established Papa and anything which is not typically the animal's food, but if it's something it eats under duress, it's called eating. If there was a cat which ate a date, if there's a donkey that ate fish, they pay full damages because they'll eat these things under duress. Gemara says that there was a donkey, the donkey ate a piece of bread, and after it ate the bread, it chewed the basket that the bread was placed upon. Chayeves Rav Yehuda l'shalim nezek shalom anahama v'asal. Rav Yehuda says you have to pay full damages for the bread, for eating the bread, and also for the basket you have to pay half damages because it's goring. Because a donkey doesn't typically eat a basket. Amai, keep it. So I ask the question on Rav Yehuda's psak. Amai, keep the orchel mechol nama. Since the animal typically eats the bread, orchel nama fusisol. We'll say it'll eat the basket at the same time. It's not going to stop. Mara says, no, the achol, we're talking about a case where it ate the bread, v'hadar palos, and later on it came back, not in the same act, and ate the basket. And we're going to say, therefore, the basket is goring, it's half damages. Upas or who's, and then Gemara asks a separate question. Does a donkey typically eat bread? Veraminu, but didn't we say, achol pasu basar v'tap shel mashalim chatzi nezik? That didn't we learn in the bright side? It says that if, presumably the donkey ate bread and meat and the cooked food, it pays half damages like goring. My love, but are we talking about an animal? And we see from here that the donkey doesn't typically eat bread. No, we're talking there about a chaya. So the Gemara says chaya, basar, or chayu, does this wild animal typically eat meat? So the Gemara says wild animal, basar or chayu, it does typically eat meat, so it should pay full damages for eating the meat. Gemara says the mitvi. Now we're talking about a case that the meat was roasted. And so therefore, a chaya doesn't typically eat roasted meat. V'bayisema betavir, or we're talking about a deer doesn't typically eat meat. V'bayisema la'olam bebehema, or else it's an animal who b'ptorah. And we're talking about a case where the bread was on the table. An animal doesn't go typically to eat bread from the table. And so therefore it's unusual, so it's foreign. Gemara says, on top of Chafam and Alf, Ahu Barucha, there was a goat, the Chaza Lifta Apuma de Dana. So the goat saw a piece of turnip that was placed upon a barrel, and then what happened was Sarek Salik. So the goat grabbed onto the barrel with its legs, and it went up on the barrel. And Achu Iftevet and it ate the turnip, and it broke the barrel. Chive Rava Alifta Vadana. So Rava says that this is the way the animal eats. So you have to pay for both the turnip and the bucket nezek showing, and the barrel nezek full damages. My time. So since it typically eats a turnip, well, this is the way it eats it. It eats it by climbing up on the barrel. So of course it's going to break the barrel. All right, let's stop here, and I just want to say a couple of things about scheduling.